Hello, I would like to talk to you today about independent researchers and research funding. Here in the UK, where I'm based, most research funding comes from the government through an organisation called UKRI, which stands for UK Research and Innovation. This organisation was formed a couple of years ago, I think, and brought together several research councils, such as the ESRC, which is the Economic and Social Research Council, and the AHRC, which is the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and several others. They still exist as separate entities, but under this umbrella organisation. And in July of this year, the Chief Executive of UKRI, who is Professor Dame Ottoline Laser, said that they are firmly committed to supporting the full range of people who make up the UK's outstanding research and innovation system. And she also said they will use all the opportunities we have to foster the inclusive and supportive research and innovation culture needed for success. Doesn't that sound great? But do you know, independent researchers in the UK are not even eligible to apply for funding from UKRI, which controls the vast majority of research funding in this country. It's not the case that we might not get it, it's that we're not even able to apply. We are allowed to be named on bids that are headed by people in universities, but no independent researcher can apply in their own right or as a small research organisation. I'm going to explain why I think this is wrong, not least because it actually contravenes what the Chief Executive of URI states as their intention and aims, but also because there are increasing numbers of independent researchers in this country, because the precarity of academic employment is increasing and more academic researchers are moving into independent research because they can no longer work in academia. Yet independent researchers are marginalised by our main funders. And this is a real waste of a valuable national resource. There are several reasons for this. Independent researchers are agile. We can move much more quickly than organisations. We can respond more quickly to requests for help with research. We are also highly cost effective. We have low overheads. I was deeply shocked when I saw a bid to UKRI from a university, which I saw because I was named on that bid. And they wanted my feedback on what I was being put forward to do to make sure that this worked for me. And that was very kind. And I was glad and grateful to be able to give that input. But I was absolutely horrified to discover that 50% of the bid, half of the money, was going to the university for overheads. Only half was being spent on the research. With independent researchers, I would be astonished if any researcher needed to charge more than, say, 10% for overheads, probably nearer 5%. Some of us aren't even registered for VAT. So much more of the research budget could be spent on research. Having said that, I argue strongly for this and have been doing for some years. Whenever I meet a representative of a research council, I put this argument to them. But in view of fairness, it is essential, I think, for me to acknowledge that not every independent researcher is excellent. So anyone deciding to commission work from an independent researcher needs to do their own due diligence to make sure that the independent researcher concerned is going to be up to the job. In particular, when employment is precarious, sadly that is the case where some people state they're independent researchers when really they're looking for jobs as hard as they can go. I don't blame anyone for doing this, but it is a real thing where people might get money from a research council and then say they can't do the research because they've just got a full-time job. And I know that has happened with researchers, independent researchers who are named on bids. And this is unfortunate, but it's important to acknowledge it. But also to acknowledge that this happens with a minority of independent researchers. Many of us have been independent researchers for a long time, are going to carry on being independent researchers, never have any intention of ever getting a proper employment job ever again. And a lot of us can do a great deal of very good research for small budgets in reasonable timeframes. Recently, I came into contact with a couple of representatives of the Economic and Social Research Council, and I raised this question with them again. I got a much more hopeful answer than I've ever had before, And I have hope now that I will see positive change to this in my lifetime. Probably not early enough to affect my own work, but I hope that younger independent researchers coming up now will be able to benefit from government funding, and that government in turn will be able to benefit from the skills and the dedication of the independent research workforce of this country.